The galaxy remembers Primarchs as legends, as gods of war, icons of strength, vision, and loyalty, warriors whose mere presence could turn the tide of a campaign, whose names were whispered with reverence across star systems. Yet among them, there exists a shadowed story the Imperium tried to erase, a story so horrifying that even history recoiled at its truth. One Primarch did not fall to chaos. He did not rebel for ambition or conquest. He did not succumb to rage. Instead, he turned his unmatched power inward, against the sons he had created, nurtured, and led, against a legion that worshipped him without question. He executed them. Entire companies vanished. Jean's sons were hunted. Battle brothers fell beneath the hands of their father, their screams swallowed by void and fire. Signals for aid were sent and then abruptly silenced. Fleet logs ended mid-report. Worlds burned as though a ghost had passed through. And when the silence finally descended, nothing remained but ash, shattered armor, and the lingering echo of a name erased from every record. This was not madness. It was not a loss of control. It was calculated, precise, and merciless. Every death served a purpose. Every strike a statement. The galaxy knew of betrayal and treachery, but nothing like this. Nothing as intimate, as deliberate, as horrifying. Tonight, we will step into the darkness behind that silence. We will follow the path of the Primarch who killed his own sons. We will witness the carnage, uncover the secrets, and confront the questions the Imperium never allowed to be asked. Because some truths are too terrible to survive, and some horrors are too absolute to be forgotten. The legions of the Imperium are celebrated in song and memory. Their banners fly over conquered worlds. Their names are etched in the history of humanity's survival. Yet, there exists one legion the galaxy does not speak of, one legion so thoroughly erased that even the stars themselves seem to refuse their name. Their campaigns are absent from archives, their victories stripped from records, their existence denied. No monument honors them. No tale celebrates their heroism. Their Primarch's visage is forbidden. And yet, the truth lingers, like a shadow at the edge of perception, because what was done cannot be undone. This legion did not perish because of an enemy. They did not fall in glorious battle. They were hunted, exterminated, not by outsiders, but by the one being who should have been their protector, their father, their God in flesh. The Emperor of mankind received reports of anomalies. Communications were fragmented, often ending in static or terror-stricken pleas. Yet, no rescue fleet was dispatched. The Imperium itself recoiled from the truth, for to intervene would have been to acknowledge the horror that had already taken root. To understand the scale of what occurred, one must step beyond doctrine, beyond the sanitized victories recited in textbooks. One must look to Primarch himself, a being crafted to embody perfection, to lead without question, to bend a legion to his will. And yet, in that perfection lay the seed of annihilation. The legion did not betray him. They did not challenge his command. They simply became aware of truths too dangerous to exist. Knowledge, faith, and loyalty intertwined to create a threat greater than any Xenos, demon, or heretic. The Primarch acted with cold, unflinching certainty. Every move calculated, every strike unavoidable. By the time the Legion understood what was happening, it was already too late. Brother fought brother. Fortresses fell without external assault. Entire companies disappeared, leaving only silence and ruin. Tonight, we venture into the story the Imperium tried to destroy. We will trace the footsteps of a god who became executioner, explore the secrets that justified the unspeakable, and confront the shadows left in the wake of absolute loyalty betrayed. This is a tale of horror, of action, and of mystery, a truth so dark that even the stars have tried to forget. He was not like the others. Where his brothers embodied fury, ambition, or boundless pride, he was a figure of calculation, of inevitability. The other Primarchs struck fear or awe through their presence, their charisma, their rage, but he commanded through precision, through order, through the terrifying clarity of a mind that saw every possibility, every outcome, and every failure before it happened. From the moment he emerged, the galaxy understood that this Primarch was not born to inspire. He was born to dominate with methodical efficiency. His steps were deliberate, his gaze assessing, his words few but devastating in their impact. Every gesture, every command carried weight. Every decision carried consequences calculated to the smallest detail. Nothing was left to chance. And those who served him, his legion, the sons he had forged his image, knew this instinctively. His legion mirrored him perfectly. Soldiers did not act impulsively. They did not rebel. They did not question. They advanced as one, a single organism moving with mechanical precision across battlefields that others would call chaotic. Worlds fell before them, sometimes without a shot fired. Entire enemy forces surrendered simply because resistance against this legion was, in every practical sense, impossible. And yet, there was no arrogance, no grandstanding, only results. Every victory was clean, swift, and absolute, but perfection has a cost. For this Primarch, loyalty alone was not enough. Mere obedience did not satisfy him. He demanded more: understanding, alignment, purity of purpose. Every warrior was trained to anticipate his needs, to think as he thought, to act as he would act. The Legion was not merely a military force. It was an extension of his mind, a reflection of his will. And within this reflection, there was no room for imperfection. Deviation, even the slightest hesitation or doubt, was noticed immediately. Not all errors were punished with death. Sometimes they were removed quietly, surgically, to prevent doubt from spreading. Entire training regiments existed to condition his sons into an unthinking perfection, and most succeeded. They learned to anticipate the Primarch's desires before he spoke. They learned to execute complex maneuvers with the precision of a single, unified consciousness. To outsiders, he seemed flawless. To allies, he was a dream of order incarnate. To enemies, he was a nightmare, a force of inevitability they could not escape. And yet, behind the facade of calm, there was a darkness few understood, a vision so exacting, so absolute, that anything outside his parameters became a threat, not merely to him, but to the very structural reality he had imposed upon the universe. His sons worship him, but it was not the worship of fear or love. It was a worship of inevitability. They trusted him completely, as one might trust the laws of physics or the orbit of a planet. And that trust, unquestioning and total, was exactly what would make their destruction possible. It is said that a leader is defined by how his soldiers see him in moments of crisis. His legion never faltered. They never panicked. In campaigns spanning the stars, they moved as one, executing complex operations that would have confounded lesser commanders. Supply lines were anticipated before they became necessary. Enemy strategies were countered before they were conceived. Casualties were minimized, morale maintained, and victory ensured. To witness them in battle was to witness the physical embodiment of thought itself, a machine of war perfectly tuned to the mind of its creator. And yet, beneath this perfection, a subtle terror simmered. Soldiers sometimes awoke in the middle of the night, haunted by dreams they could not explain. Visions of impossible calculations, of decisions made before the world existed, of actions they had taken without memory. They whispered quietly among themselves, unsure whether it was insight, foresight, or madness. Some tried to dismiss it. Some prayed for absolution. None spoke openly, because the Primarch had taught them that all uncertainty was dangerous. In time, the Legion became more than a force of war. It became a living testament to his vision. Each company, each squad, each individual bore the imprint of his mind. They were, in essence, extensions of him. And as the Primarch observed them from his command bridge, he saw the world through their eyes, their reflexes, their instincts. Every action they took was an echo of his will, a manifestation of his perfection. And yet, perfection has a shadow. The Primarch understood that control is fragile. That knowledge, once acquired, can threaten even the most absolute power. That loyalty, when paired with awareness, can turn into rebellion. The very qualities he had instilled in his sons, their intelligence, their adaptability, their ability to act independently within parameters he designed, contained the seeds of catastrophe. The Legion did not know it yet. They believed themselves invincible. They believed in him. They believed that nothing could undo the order they embodied. But in the mind of their Primarch, a chilling calculation had already been made, a scenario no one else could perceive. a possibility in which their very existence became a liability. And when that moment arrived, when awareness threatened to eclipse obedience, he would act, not with emotion, not with rage, but with a certainty of inevitability, because perfection is not measured in victories. It is measured in control. And absolute control tolerates no deviation, no error, no rebellion, even from those who were. It began on a world that should have been forgotten, a planet on the fringe of explored space, orbiting a dying star whose light barely reached the surface. To most, it was a tomb of silence, a remnant of an older age. Its ruins whispered of civilizations long gone, and its deserts were empty, barren, and cold. Yet the Primarch's eyes saw potential where others saw only dust and shadow. He ordered a full planetary survey, a full Legion deployment, and full excavation. His sons arrived in disciplined columns, their boots leaving precise tracks in the ash of a world that had not seen life for centuries. They followed his commands unquestioningly, aware that deviation from his plan could be fatal. And yet, even in their obedience, there was a sense of anticipation. This mission was different. The air crackled with an unseen tension, as though the planet itself had been waiting. Beneath the surface, in caverns untouched by time, they discovered it, a structure older than the Imperium, older than the Great Crusade. Its architecture was alien yet familiar, geometric yet impossible, etched with glyphs that seemed to shift in the corner of the eye. No human hand had built this. No Xenos race cataloged in the records had left its mark. The air inside hummed with energy, a resonance that vibrated through bone and soul alike. The Primarch approached it, his senses acutely aware of every detail. He felt no awe, no fear, only the clarity of understanding. He ordered the Legion to set up protective measures and initiate a deep scan. What they uncovered defied comprehension. It was not a weapon, not a relic, not a cache of forbidden technology. It was a truth, a revelation about the universe, about the nature of creation, and about the Emperor himself. The inscription spoke of a cosmic order beyond even the understanding of the Primarchs, of a pattern in which their existence was merely a variable, a tool, a controlled anomaly. As the translation devices began to hum, officers read the glyph aloud. At first, the words seemed innocuous, ancient history, lost knowledge, but then the meaning became clear. It was a blueprint of manipulation, of control, of the very threads that bound life, death, and loyalty across the galaxy. It revealed weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and truths about the Emperor's design that were never meant to be known. The Legion's officers were the first to feel its weight. Whispers passed through squads. The realization spread like a poison. Some truths were too immense, too dangerous, to survive the comprehension of mortals, even enhanced mortals. And their Primarch understood this immediately. Knowledge, once acquired, could destroy the Legion, but it could also threaten him, not because he lacked control, but because control itself depended on ignorance. Those who understood the patterns could question, deviate, or disrupt the order he had imposed. And the Legion, by its very perfection, was capable of understanding far more than any other army in the galaxy. The first subtle signs appeared in the form of hesitation. Soldiers paused mid-task, eyes flicking toward the glyphs as if seeing not just symbols, but intent. Questions were formed and unspoken, doubts crystallizing the minds of those who had never doubted before. For the first time, the Primarch observed uncertainty in his sons, a flaw in the system he had perfected. He walked among them, silent, calculating. The cavern's light reflected off his armor, casting long, angular shadows that seemed almost to reach into the minds of his warriors. His gaze swept over them, noting who faltered and who remained steadfast. Every hesitation, every thought unaligned with his vision, was logged in the quiet calculus of his mind. When the translation revealed the full scope of the revelation, he knew the danger. This was not mere knowledge. This was a weapon far deadlier than any gun, any demon, any fleet of warships. Once the Legion understood it fully, nothing could restrain them. Not loyalty, not fear, not reverence. They could not remain obedient. The pattern was too clear, too logical, too consuming. And then he made a decision. He would not allow them to survive this. Not as a rebellion, not as a betrayal, not even as soldiers. They had glimpsed too much. And glimpsing is a first step to disobedience. The Legion's perfection, which had made them invincible, had now made them a threat. Their very minds, designed to reflect his will, would now reflect truths that could unmake everything he had built. Orders were issued. On the surface, they seemed normal. Excavation continued. Mapping continued. Defensive protocols maintained. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, preparations for termination began. Deployments were adjusted. Fleet trajectories plotted. Contingencies calculated. No one outside his mind would ever know. No one outside the Legion would see the coming storm. The planet's silence grew heavier with each passing hour, as if it too recognized the inevitability of what was to come. The Legion moved, unaware of the subtle orchestration, shaping their doom. Their perfect obedience, once a testament to his genius, would now facilitate the most horrifying action the galaxy had ever witnessed. A Primarch preparing to destroy his own sons. Not in anger, not in error, but in cold, absolute necessity. By the time the first company would be sacrificed, the pattern would be complete. Every reaction, every countermeasure, every instinct had been anticipated. The Primarch's mind was a fortress, and the Legion, his creation, was trapped within the walls of a plan they could neither see nor comprehend. This was a discovery that changed everything, not the revelation itself, but the knowledge that perfection had a limit. That control, even over the most perfect army ever forged, could be broken by understanding. And when that limit was reached, the Primarch would act, not as a general, but as an executioner. Because some truths, no matter how magnificent, are too dangerous to survive. The first strike came quietly, not with fanfare, not with warning, not with the chaos of a battlefield. It came as if the universe itself had decided that certain lives should simply vanish. The Legion had been deployed across the planet for excavation, their operations seemingly routine. The Primarch observed from his command vessel orbiting the dying sun, eyes sharper than any sensor array. Every movement of his sons was catalogued, every reaction anticipated, every instinct predicted. In his mind, the pattern was complete. And yet, the final calculation had yet to be executed. Orders were transmitted across encrypted channels. At first, the directives appeared mundane. Reinforce Grid 9, survey Northern Cavern, secure perimeter. The Legion, conditioned to respond without question, obeyed. But embedded within these instructions were subtle modifications, trajectories, deployment sequences, and timing designed not to guide but to trap. The first company deployed into the Northern Cavern. They descended into the shadows of a world that had not seen light in millennia. Their sensors pinged, mapping walls etched with ancient glyphs. They reported nothing unusual, nothing alarming. And yet, every channel, every system had been tampered with. Life support oscillations, atmospheric pressure readings, even the timing of supply drops, all manipulated to perfection. It began subtly. Communications faltered, subtle delays. Tactical feeds glitched. Officers assumed a system error. Then the traps engaged. Structural collapses sealed off exits. Automated defense systems, designed to assist them, targeted them instead. Energy pulses and crushing barriers cut off their retreat. Panic set in. Not chaos, not disorder, but sharp, precise fear, the type that comes when you realize the environment itself has betrayed you. The Primarch descended personally. His armor gleamed under the dim sun of the planet. His steps silent but inexorably powerful. He carried no weapon beyond his own presence, for to face him in combat was to face inevitability itself. When he entered the cavern, the company's battle brothers barely had time to comprehend the horror before him. Their commander tried to issue orders, but the Primarch anticipated each word, each gesture, each reaction, and counted it before it left their lips. There was no mercy. There was no hesitation. The sons he had forged were perfect soldiers, trained for any combat scenario. Yet none could survive against the mind that had created them. He struck with precision, dismantling squads one by one, not just with force, but with strategy that exploited every expectation they had been conditioned to follow. Where they anticipated his attack, he was already elsewhere. Where they tried to flank, the terrain itself conspired against them. Their screams echoed to the tunnels, reverberating off walls that had been silent for centuries. But the Primarch did not pause. He did not falter. He executed with the calm efficiency of a clockwork machine. The horror was not in the violence. It was in the certainty. Each son knew, in the final moments of life, that this was not madness. This was intention. This was inevitability. And that certainty made their death almost unbearable. Outside the caverns, the rest of the Legion began to notice anomalies. Communications with the Northern Company ceased. Signals became scrambled, then went dead entirely. Scouts sent to investigate found only silence. Nothing remained of the First Company. No bodies, no wreckage, no trace. Only the cavern, as if swallowing them whole. Panic spread like a silent contagion. Officers tried to reestablish command. Squads moved cautiously, questioning orders for the first time in decades. And yet, each hesitation had been anticipated. The Primarch's mind, spanning the battlefield and orbit alike, countered every contingency. Supply lines failed. Reinforcements never arrived. Retreat paths were blocked by collapsed tunnels or malfunctioning elevators. The sons of the Legion were trapped in a meticulously orchestrated execution. The second strike followed. Boarding teams were cut off mid-ascent from the planet's surface. Orbital defenses, once aligned to protect them, turned inward. Energy beams, precision-calibrated, tore through hulls, leaving no survivors. The Third Company vanished under similar conditions, their attempts to communicate dismissed as technical anomalies. The Legion began to whisper. Suspicion, fear, and disbelief seeped into ranks that had never known doubt. How could the Primarch, their father, their god, be the instrument of their destruction? Some refused to believe it. Some tried to flee. Some attempted to rally and resist. All failed. Every tactic, every escape route, every countermeasure had been foreseen and neutralized. The horror of realization struck in waves. The soldiers understood too late. The one being who had taught them strategy, combat, loyalty, and perfection was now executing the ultimate lesson, obedience to inevitability, even unto death. And in the midst of this, the Primarch moved among them, not with rage, but with a surgical precision that made him almost spectral. Every movement was a calculation. Every strike eliminated not just a life, but the potential for resistance. And yet, some resisted. Small pockets of soldiers fought with desperate courage, engaging their father in combat that, to anyone else, would have been heroic. But against him, heroism was meaningless. They fell one by one, outmatched not by strength, but by foresight. Their weapons, their tactics, their instincts, all anticipated and rendered useless. Their loyalty, once their greatest strength, became their undoing, for it had been conditioned to follow the Primarch without question. When the first execution concluded, the Primarch transmitted a single message across all Legion channels. No explanation, no warning, only confirmation of compliance. And in that silence, the remaining companies understood the grim truth. The execution had begun. The line between obedience and survival had been erased. The Legion, the sons of a god, would not endure, not because they failed, not because they disobeyed, but because their understanding had become dangerous, and the planet itself seemed to mourn, its barren surface still and heavy with ash. The cavern walls, once silent, now held the echoes of screams that would never be forgotten. For the survivors, every glance at the shadows, every sound in the distance, carried the weight of inevitability. The Primarch had demonstrated that perfection could also be terror, that loyalty could be death, and that knowledge could be a weapon sharper than any blade. By the time the third wave of execution concluded, the Legion's cohesion was broken. Soldiers no longer acted as one. Command structures fractured. Fear replaced confidence. And still, the Primarch remained unwavering, calculating, absolute. He had transformed his sons into instruments of their own doom, not by failing them, but by anticipating everything they could ever do. This was the moment the galaxy would never record, not because it was forgotten, but because it was too monstrous to exist in memory. The first execution was not a battle. It was a lesson, a revelation, a warning to any who might think knowledge could be contained, or that loyalty was absolute. The Primarch had shown, with horrifying clarity, that even perfection could be weaponized, and that some truths demanded the ultimate sacrifice. The first execution was not the end. It was the beginning. The galaxy had never witnessed anything like it. Not rebellion, not Xeno's incursion, not demonic invasion. This was something far worse. The Primarch had unleashed a war against his own sons, and it was absolute, inevitable, and meticulously calculated. The remaining companies had begun to grasp the scale of the betrayal. Communications were fragmented, fleet logs interrupted by unexplained void disturbances. The northern caverns, once home to the first executed company, had become a tomb of silence. Panic gripped the Legion. Discipline faltered, and yet, even in their fear, they remained unaware that every movement, every instinct, every reaction had already been anticipated. The Primarch's strategy was not conventional. He did not rely on brute force alone, nor on the simple might of his legion. He turned their own perfection against them. Deployment orders were manipulated, turning retreat into entrapment. Reinforcement corridors became death traps. Orbital drop sequences, designed to deliver aid, delivered destruction instead. Every soldier, conditioned to follow his commands without question, now unwittingly marched into annihilation. On the planet's surface, he moved like a shadow of inevitability. A single squad attempted to flank him through a canyon ridge. The Primarch anticipated it before the move was made. A seismic pulse collapsed the ridge above them, burying half the squad. Those who survived turned instinctively toward escape, only to find the terrain itself has shifted. Pre-programmed barriers and energy fields closing paths, as if the planet itself obeyed his will. Meanwhile, orbital strikes targeted their fleet. Ships that should have been allies were turned against them with horrifying precision. Energy beams tore through hulls. Boarding parties were annihilated mid-ascent. The very void seemed to betray them. The Primarch's mind spanned the battlefield and orbit simultaneously, seeing every vector, predicting every maneuver, adjusting reality itself to enforce the inevitability of death. In the carnage, some warriors attempted resistance. The Second Company, seasoned veterans of countless campaigns, tried to coordinate a counterattack. They rallied in battle formations that had never failed before. Yet every tactic, every strategy, every maneuver had been anticipated. Where they expected an opening, the Primarch had already prepared a trap. Entire squads were vaporized by automated turrets, trapped by collapsing structures, or lured into ambushes where they fell without ever understanding how defeat had reached them. The psychological torment was as effective as the physical destruction. The sons of the Legion, trained to anticipate his will, now realized that anticipation itself was a death sentence. They had been designed to follow perfectly, and that perfection had made them predictable. Desperation replaced strategy. Loyalty became terror. And in that terror, the Primarch walked among them, not with rage, but with cold, unflinching execution. Some of the most elite soldiers attempted a desperate boarding maneuver to escape via orbiting vessels. They boarded dropships with weapons primed, determined to strike against their father or flee to safety. But the Primarch anticipated it. Ships failed mid-transit, engines ruptured under precision strikes, and boarding airlocks sealed, trapping warriors inside until fire and vacuum did the rest. No corner of the battlefield offered sanctuary. No command channel could provide relief. The Primarch had planned for everything, and nothing survived outside his calculation. The horror extended beyond combat. The Legion began to fracture psychologically. Soldiers questioned their own instincts. Some refused orders, paralyzed by the realization that every action might lead to death. Others tried to rally squads, only to find that cohesion had already been undermined by the Primarch's manipulation of logistics, communications, and terrain. Fear was no longer fear. It was certainty. Every heartbeat, every breath, carried the weight of inevitability. The Primarch descended personally to the battlefield at critical moments. His armor gleamed with cold metallic precision, reflecting the flames and destruction surrounding him. Battle brothers who had trained under him, fought alongside him, and revered him as a god, now faced a living executioner who anticipated every strike before it was made. Even the strongest warriors, those genetically perfected and trained to perfection, fell before him, not from brute force, but from the simple certainty that resistance was futile. On one devastated plateau, he confronted the survivors of the Third Company. Their commander, a veteran of countless campaigns, attempted to appeal to his father, pleading for mercy, for reason, for logic. But the Primarch spoke nothing. He simply moved with the inevitability of inevitability itself, and one by one, the sons who had trusted him completely were executed in a display of strategic precision that left no room for mercy or escape. The ground drank their blood, the air echoed their screams, and yet the Primarch's calm remained unbroken, his mind focused on perfection of the purge. Fleet engagements mirrored the slaughter on the ground. Drop ships, strike cruisers, and orbital bombardments were coordinated not just to destroy, but to terrorize. Each attack was calculated to maximize psychological impact, as well as physical damage. Surviving soldiers could see the annihilation of their comrades across miles of battlefield, their morale collapsing under the weight of hopelessness. There was no rallying cry, no opportunity for retreat. The Primarchs will dominated both space and planet, making the very battlefield an instrument of execution. By the time the final survivors realized the truth, it was too late. Entire companies had vanished. Fortresses designed to withstand siege were destroyed from within. Communications were jammed or corrupted, and the sons who looked upon their Primarch now looked upon him with abject terror, understanding at last the scope of what they had always been part of and what they could never survive. This was not punishment. This was not retribution. This was war against blood, against loyalty, against family. Every measure, every tactic, every execution was deliberate. The Primarch had turned his greatest creation against itself, exploiting perfection as a weapon and obedience as a trap. The Legion, unmatched in skill, faith, and loyalty, had become nothing more than pawns in a game they could never comprehend. As the day ended, the battlefield was a vision of horror. Fires raged across the surface. Craters scarred the landscape. Orbital debris littered the void. And yet, the Primarch remained unscathed, calm, unyielding, the architect of absolute destruction. The galaxy would not see this truth. Even the Imperium itself would not record it. It was a lesson meant to exist only in the minds of the survivors, if any survived, and in the calculations of a being who understood that some truths were too dangerous to live. The war against blood had begun, and there was no end in sight. When the final echoes of battle faded, the world was unrecognizable. Flames still licked the horizons, casting a sickly orange glow over ruins that had once been alive with the sound of footsteps, orders, and brotherhood. Craters scarred the landscape. Jagged towers twisted into impossible angles, and the air was heavy with smoke and the acrid scent of burned ceramite. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was absolute. It was deliberate. The Primarch stood among the remnants of what had once been a legion. His armor reflected the dying light of the sun, flawless, pristine, and terrifying in its calm. Around him, there was no sound of movement, only the occasional collapse of a ruined wall or the faint groan of the earth under its own devastation. Every son he had forged, every soldier he had trained, every warrior he had nurtured into perfection had been erased, not by chaos, not by enemies, but by the one who had made them. No record remained. Communications to the rest of the Imperium had been sanitized before transmission. Fleet logs were scrubbed. Gene seed repositories were destroyed. Entire companies vanished as if they had never existed. The Imperium would report anomalies, failures, and technical malfunctions. But the truth, the horrific truth of a Primarch executing his own legion, would never surface. It was too dangerous, too unsettling, too incomprehensible for human minds to bear. Yet for the Primarch, there was no triumph. There was no glory. There was only purpose. Every decision had been precise, every strike deliberate, every life extinguished a calculated necessity. He had acted not in anger, not in revenge, but in the cold logic of inevitability. Knowledge, awareness, and loyalty had become too dangerous to coexist. His sons had seen too much, understood too much, and their potential to disrupt perfection had made them unfit to survive. The few who remained were scattered and broken. Some lay wounded amid rubble, their minds fractured by the terror they had witnessed. Some were frozen in shock, unable to comprehend the scale of what had happened. They could not trust each other, nor themselves, nor the very reality around them. Their loyalty had been weaponized. Their faith had been twisted into terror, and they would carry this understanding to their graves, silent witnesses to an atrocity that would never be recorded. The galaxy outside would continue unaware. Fleet movements would report anomalies, planetary surveys would fail, and strategic assessments would be confused by the sudden absence of a legion. The Imperium would speculate on causes, Xenos attacks, internal sabotage, or catastrophic errors, but none would guess the truth. None would recognize the horror of a god executing his own sons, a perfection turned into annihilation, of loyalty made fatal. And yet, some truths cannot be erased. In the few surviving minds, questions festered. Why did he act? Why not purge only those who resisted? Why not spare even a fraction? And most unsettling of all, if such calculated horror could occur within a single legion, how many other forces, other worlds, other lives, were quietly under the watchful eye of those who understood too much? The answers would remain unspoken, unrecorded, and likely unasked for all eternity. In the silence, the Primarch transmitted a final message. Not a plea, not an explanation, only confirmation. Every instruction, every plan, every calculation had been executed to perfection. Nothing remained of the Legion except the ruin, the ash, and the memory burned into the minds of a few scattered survivors. As he departed the planet, ascending to orbit, the silence followed him. The void itself seemed to acknowledge the enormity of his actions. Stars shone indifferently. Planets continued their orbits, and yet the galaxy had shifted. A force meant to protect and inspire had been transformed into a weapon against its own, and the pattern of obedience, faith, and perfection had been tested, and found capable of destruction. The Imperium would never speak of this world. The Emperor would never acknowledge it. Histories would be rewritten. Records would be purged. But the horror would persist in the emptiness left behind, in the shadows of ruined worlds, in the void of fleet corridors, and in the minds of those few who had witnessed even a fragment of what had occurred. Some say the Primarch was punished. Some say he was imprisoned. Some whisper that he still walks the galaxy, perfect, patient, and ever calculating. Perhaps he waits for another moment when knowledge and loyalty collide in ways that threaten the fragile order he understands. Perhaps he is the ultimate arbiter of inevitability, a god who measures the cost of awareness and executes judgment with precision. What is certain is this: the legion that never should have been remembered is gone. The sons who once followed their father with perfect faith are dead, and the galaxy, blind to the atrocity, continues on, built upon victories, illusions, and secrets so terrible that even the stars have tried to forget. The silence after the war is eternal. It is complete. It is horrifying. And in that silence, one lesson remains. Loyalty, knowledge, and perfection, when combined, can be more dangerous than any enemy the galaxy has ever known. Because some truths are too terrible to survive. Because some horrors are too absolute to be forgotten. Because the Primarch who killed his own legion may not have been a monster. He may have been the only one who truly understood the cost of knowing too much. And in that realization lies the final horror.